Welcome to Racket Fanatic podcast, Tales of a Tennis Legend. Every week I'll be telling a story about the greatest players to have ever played the game. In this series we're talking about Pete Sampras, and this is episode 7, how a 19-year-old won the US Open. So I've thoroughly enjoyed reading about Pete Sampras. It's been a very interesting journey, and even though he's still the youngest male tennis player to have ever won the US Open at 19 years old, which is just an incredible feat. Once you understand his background and his training when he was younger, and also his mentality, it all makes sense. And I think what it does for me, it explains that champions are not necessarily born, they are made. Of course, you need the makeup, you need the talent, you need the eye for the sport, and you need the mentality. But it's all about your surroundings, whether that's a parent or a coach or an uncle or a family member. Somebody needs to be around to guide you through, whether that's for mental advice, technical advice. This idea that you are just a lone wolf and you figure it out for yourself, I haven't really heard of that type of story. I'm not entirely sure that story exists. Maybe it does, but for the most part, champions are made and super successful people are made, and they need that support network from a young age. One of the interesting things about Pete from a young age is that he always had belief. He always believed that he was going to be a tennis player. He started about the same age that most players do, 5, 6 years old. Started off just hitting balls against the wall and got his mum to feed him tennis balls. And he describes it as the minute he touches the racket, he was like, this is the greatest toy on earth. And really never looked back. And from a very young age, he decided, I'm going to be a tennis player. I'm going to be a great tennis player. And that's it. So having that belief and inner confidence carries through. And here's a little quote that explains that. But maybe the assumption that I was going to be as great as everyone suggested helped me become what I am. Deep down, I knew I had that confidence. The amazing thing is that nothing happened to break it, tone it down, or take it away. And I went through a lot that could have robbed me of that sense of destiny. So, what he's saying there, even though he went through some peaks and troughs throughout his early career, didn't make a dent in his mentality. He always knew he was going to be a great tennis player. Any losses or setbacks he didn't take too personally. It wasn't a massive blow because he knew where he was going. So I think that's a message to all people that have a goal. So where it all started, he started getting coaching at the age of 8 by somebody called Robert Lansdorp. Robert Lansdorp is an incredible coach. It's the to to have somebody like that on your doorstep is like having Alex Ferguson teach at your local football club. It's an unbelievable blessing. There was a few things that happened in Pete's early life by chance that created this scenario where he could learn from the best. So he's actually from Maryland, but his family is Greek descent, so he's Greek American. When his father sold his business, he moved to Southern California. Now, Southern California at the time was becoming an absolute boom and hotspot for tennis. They have the weather all year round, so of course you can train all year round without much disruption. So there was a pop up of tennis courts everywhere. So there was an abundance of tennis players. There's also, with that, an abundance of tennis coaches. A lot of great pros at the time would fall into coaching there, and other coaches as well, great coaches, were spouting out of California and specifically Southern California. So to be in that area at that time is amazing. And Pete, fortunately, moved there because his dad got a job there when he was young at the age of 7 or 8. So just to be in the right place at the right time worked wonders. So he started getting coached by a guy called Robert Lansdorp, who coached people like Tracy Austin, Lindsay Davenport, obviously Pete Sampras. After Pete Sampras, Maria Sharapova. He was an unbelievable coach, and he was actually known for teaching his ground strokes. He was a ground stroke specialist. But shortly after that, so as well as having one amazing coach on your doorstep, There was a very interesting character called Peter Fisher that was in Pete's life from a very young age. I think around the same time, maybe shortly after. So Pete was about 8, 9 years old. And Fisher saw the potential in Pete from a young age, started teaching him. But Fisher actually was a doctor by day, paediatrician. So he had a full time job but did tennis coaching around that. But from Pete at a young age, Fisher would teach him, coach him, and also mentor him and mentor Pete's family. So Pete's not from a tennis background. His older sister did play tennis and she was a good tennis player. She's 2 years older. The family are not from a tennis background at all. I think similar to Pete, his sister just started playing and they both took a shine to the sport. Because Pete's dad didn't have a tennis background and cleverly his father admitted that he knows nothing about tennis and didn't pretend he did. I think that's a mistake a lot of parents make. They have no idea about tennis or the sport that their child is good at, but they pretend like they know everything and decide to manage their kid's career even though they have no idea about the sport, which is a massive mistake, really. But Pete's father was very clever. He made no assumption that he knew anything about tennis. He was there more just to help and support. So Fisher decided to take a bigger presence in Pete's tennis life. From the age of 8, 9, he was coaching Pete. He'd go around for dinner at their family's house and he'd talk to the father, he'd talk to Pete about his game, about tennis, and really try and educate the family as much as he could do, as well as spending time on court. They actually describe him as part of the family, which is amazing to hear. And I think that's what it takes, really. And even though it's a completely different story, the Agassi story to Sampras, it has one similarity, which is there's somebody that needs to guide this child to become the champion. With Agassi, it was his dad, and then from there, obviously, he had other coaches and influences that helped him, progress, like Bollettieri, and then obviously fitness trainer Gil Reyes, and there was other figures in his life, but it all started with his dad before he went to the academy. And Pete Sampras is exactly the same, just a different scenario. For him, it was Pete Fisher. Now, Pete Fisher he was a tennis nut, tennis fanatic, absolutely loved the game, and worked with Pete on his game. And what he didn't know, he'd bring in other coaches, which is quite clever, really. So Robert Lansdorp, he was the ground stroke specialist, so he'd work with Pete just on his ground strokes. As time went on, he brought somebody in to work on his net game, on his volley, smashes, and his whole net play. And Fisher would predominantly work with Sampras on his serve, his iconic serve. And it seems like over the years, as Pete got older, he'd just bring in specialists to help develop Pete's game, which is a very smart approach. Fisher would essentially be the manager. He'd manage the training, oversee it, and bring specialists in to help develop his game. So to have somebody like this in your life from 8, 9 years old and all these amazing coaches around you, along with living in Southern California, it's almost hard not to produce a great tennis player. Fisher became a daily presence in our family's life as time went on, and we soon had a comfortable pattern going. I would work with Del Little, so Del Little was another tennis coach, on Tuesdays, take from Lansdorp on Thursdays, and work with Fisher at the end of the work week on Friday. Between lessons and on weekends, I played practice matches and other juniors or went to tournaments. From the age of 8, 9 years old, it was pretty scheduled and it was getting more and more regimented and scheduled and more tennis as he got older. Now, slightly moving on from his on court training, let's look at the mental side. This is something that is just within Pete. It seemed like he had a very calm childhood. He was a well behaved kid, dedicated to tennis, still a decent student. He described himself as a B plus, A minus student until he stopped school to go on tour. He was one of four siblings, and it seems for the most part they're helping each other out. They get on with the family. He's got about 30 cousins. It's that traditional Greek family where they're a unit. So Pete had that stability of family, but also that mental calm. He said his father is a very calm person. He said he was firm at times, but still a calm, together person. He also describes his mother as very, very gentle, but also very strong. They're both immigrants that came to America for a better life. But within that, of course, you need some grit and you need that mental strength. And Pete thanks his parents for that. So Pete, from a very young age, had that mental strength. He does describe himself as more fiery, of course, as a teenager. He showed more emotion on court than he would do as a pro, of course. He's an early teen. But for the most part, he didn't feel the pressure that other kids do. A lot of other kids stress about losing the match. They choke at big points. The mental side of the game is a massive struggle for a lot of juniors, but also adults. It seemed for Pete, it was never an issue. It's something that came naturally for him. He even describes that he never choked at the pro level. He was always able to have that state of calm and just look at the task in hand and perform, which is obviously the sign of a champion, a true champion, is that mental calm and utter belief in yourself. There's another factor in this discussion. The great challenge in junior tennis is avoiding pressure, because it can be huge, just huge, especially at the national level. By putting pressure on myself to develop a great game, I had less pressure to win. These days, I tell kids that the way I grew up, it wasn't about winning, it was about playing well, about playing the right way. That approach helped me enjoy the game and develop my game to its maximum potential. So, what he's saying there is he was always focused on the task at hand and playing the best that he could do. Whatever his tactics were or the technical side, what he's looking to achieve, that was his focus. The end goal of winning was a result of that. So him, nor his parents or his coach Fisher would put the pressure on him to win. It was all about playing the right way, play the right style, and the results will come. So I think having that approach is a really healthy way, like he says, and you get to enjoy the game and take away some of the pressure. It's an easy thing to overlook, but always remember that everyone is different. There is no one size fits all formula for development. The one thing that is very interesting in Pete's story as a junior is that he was a really good junior. He wasn't a superstar. He wasn't at Agassi's level, but he was a really good junior. But at 14, Fisher decided to change Pete's backhand from two-handed to one-handed, which is very late to change, and this can be extremely detrimental if not done correctly. For his coach to take someone that is a really good junior, performing well, and change their backhand and dismantle their game, it's a big risk. But the rationale behind it is Fisher saw Pete with an attacking game. He saw the potential with the serve. He saw the potential with his forehand weapon, and they wanted to create more of an aggressive game. Before this, Pete as a junior was very much a counterpuncher, which is hard to imagine because he's an out and out serve and volleyer and aggressive player, but he was a counterpuncher. He was a grinder, run round, chase down balls, and they completely dismantled that and created a new game style for him. So when they changed his two-handed backhand to a one-handed backhand at 14, he said it took him 2 years to really settle into it. And in that period, he lost a lot of matches. He had belief in his coaches. His coaches guided him through that period of change. And there was a reason behind that change because they wanted to make a more aggressive player with a one-handed backhand. You've got the slice, you can come to the net. There was a rationale behind it, and it was all going towards a game style that they envisioned for Pete. And Pete was completely on board with that and trusted the coaches. So as amazing as Pete Sampras is, and the mental strength that he had is very, very unique and down to him. In terms of his game development, it's really all down to his coaches, the amazing coaches that he had around him, and then Fisher to take such a hands-on approach. He even spoke to the parents, said, "Listen, I know you don't have a tennis background, but I'll look after Pete's game and I'll manage his career essentially." To have someone like that and come around for dinner and be so intertwined with the family and guide Pete from 8, 9 years old until his pro career is amazing. For someone to be so involved and really take care of this child, it's a beautiful story, and it's amazing to hear. And it seems like even though that was a very risky strategy, but probably at the time to face that he's going to be losing to change to a one-handed backhand and change his style of play, obviously it really paid off. I think what Pete learned there as well is again about having that faith, and also each person is an individual. There is no one size fits all for tennis, which is a mistake a lot of coaches make. It's about developing a game style around the player. It's an easy thing to overlook, but always remember that everyone is different. There is no one-size-fits-all formula for development. What I'm saying is that it's wise to look at your game and take the long view. Where can your natural athletic inclinations take you in 5, 10, 15 years? Everyone is different emotionally and mentally too. Are you mentally tough or rigid? Are you patient or attracted to risk? Do you seek attention and approval, or are you content to work hard, keep your head down, and just win? Do you have the emotional strength to handle losing, or do you need the shot of confidence winning on a daily basis? So, what Pete is saying there is that you develop the game around the individual, and that's not just about your athleticism or your height. That can be the emotional side as well. If you're a very, very patient person, then maybe a grinder type game style is more appropriate. If you're not patient and you like to win big, then probably aggressive style is going to be more suited to you. So it's just really clever how they've approached tennis. So Pete carries on with his training. He changes backhand at 14. He doesn't really feel like he's found his feet until 16. But at 16, this is where his game is all coming together. The serve is starting to come together. His massive forehand. He feels his backhand. He's got his net play. He's been working with these amazing coaches, all orchestrated by Fisher. And it's starting to come together. At 16, as he was about to turn 17, this is when he started to have his breakout. So he had a breakout in 1988 at 16 at the US Pro Indoor Tournament in Philadelphia. In this tournament, he passed the qualifying rounds but lost first round main draw. However, as a 16-year-old to pass qualifying at a pro tournament, you've done amazingly well. So his confidence is growing, his game is coming together, and he's starting to get attention. Not too long after, he plays Indian Wells, which outside of the Grand Slams is one of the major tournaments. So in this one, again, he gets through the qualifying rounds, gets into the main draw of Indian Wells, and then starts to pass rounds in the main draw. He actually passes 2 rounds. And at that point, he realizes, okay, it's now time to go on tour and start life as a professional. We decided to make the leap right then after I beat Krishnan. Krishnan is one of the tennis players that he beat at Indian Wells. Even though it meant setting up a whole new lifestyle for me, who would travel with me, what contracts I would sign, where I would play next, and then after that, we had no idea. I was like, okay, now I'm a pro, what happens next? So that's when his pro career starts. There's something he mentions here that's very interesting, which has served him well throughout his career. He has a mantra, it's all a learning experience, which as he was developing his game, when he changed his backhand, anytime he's experienced any losses, he would always recite to himself, it's all a learning experience. And that way, he avoids being disheartened by losing. He learns to lose well, take the positives from it, and keeps growing. I think it's an amazing philosophy and mantra to have. And it's the best way to keep growing and also keep your mental sanity while going through any struggles. So now he's 16 going on 17. He's essentially on tour. He's a pro. So now what? In the summer of 1988, I finished my junior year in high school and then travelled the tour. I have no strong memories of where I played, but I remember hooking up with Jim Courier to play doubles. Jim Courier was a Grand Slam champion, amazing player in his day. For those of you that don't know him, he was at Bollettieri Academy at the same time as Agassi. He wasn't as good as Agassi. Agassi stole a lot of the limelight, but Jim was still an amazing player. I remember hooking up with Jim Courier to play doubles, and we enjoyed some success. I met Jim when we were both on the Junior Davis Cup squad as 16-year-olds, and we picked the same agency to represent us, the International Management Group, IMG. Their agent was a guy called Gavin Forbes. Gavin saw that Jim and I could benefit from a friendship that I was too shy to pursue on my own. So he arranged for me to go and train with Jim in Florida at the Bollettieri Academy. Jim and I hit it off right away, and he showed me how hard you needed to work to keep your game and fitness at an acceptable level. We would hit balls for 3 or 4 hours a day, go to the track to work on our legs and speed, go to the weight room to develop our strength, That was all new to me, and Jim and I became close. We lived together at the Bollettieri Academy, and through him, I met the teaching pro and coach Joe Brandy. I began working with Joe informally because Pete Fisher still had his day job as a doctor. Over the next 2 transitional years, I would get help from various people. By that time, I was high on the radar of our National Tennis Association. Part of their mandate is to develop junior talent, so they hooked me up with a series of coaches on a one-off basis. I went out to see the clay court expert Jose Hugueras in Palm Springs. Jose would become Jim Curry's coach and guide him to his great French Open wins. I also spent time in Jacksonville, Florida, with a guy whose game was more similar to mine, Brian Gottfried. He was an old school type serve and volleyer player who worked with me on various aspects of the attacking game. So he's turned pro at 16, and now through another connection, his agent, he's formed a relationship with Jim Courier, and he's now at Bollettieri Academy style training. It's that mentality of putting people together, looking after your junior talent and developing them. It's an amazing philosophy, and I think the Americans are great at it. And without all these people that have helped Pete along the way, you could argue he wouldn't be the same person or wouldn't have that opportunity. So a very clever move by his agent to put the two kids together to train and practice. And now Pete is he's full time. He's full time training, and he's starting to really understand how much hard work he needs to put in to be a professional tennis player. He's slowly moving away from Fisher, more so geographically. He's now training in Florida, and he's starting to speak to other coaches. Maybe if Fisher decided to leave his practice and coach Sampras or go on tour with him, maybe it would be a different story. But as it stands, he's still a doctor, and Pete is kind of on with his career. So by the time Pete was 17, he broke into the top 100. So he started from the bottom, which is around 900 in the world at that time, to top 100 within a year, which is pretty amazing. I broke into the top 100 pretty quickly in 1989. The first really big win of my pro career was a second round upset of Mats Wilander at the US Open, where he was the defending champ. So this is the year before he wins the US Open, and he's just beat Mats Wilander, who's a former number one, amazing tennis player. So this is a massive boost to his confidence and that belief that, oh, I can do this, I can beat these types of players. And he describes this as a quite a pivotal moment or a very important match in his early career. Now, as he starts to get this success and the attention and the limelight, he's now beating people like Mats Wilander. He's in the top 100, and he's still only 18, so of course he's a superstar, and he starts getting the attention. So Fisher starts to lose his mind a little bit. These rapid changes tied to my sudden success threatened the status quo I had established. There was no way Pete Fisher was going to give up his career in medicine to travel with me, but Pete loved publicity, and he enjoyed taking credit in shaping my game. As I started to become the player he had envisioned for me, it made him a little crazy and greedy. While he was back home in California, I was in Florida training with various coaches who had better credentials than Fisher. He was probably afraid he was going to be cut out of some sort of action, so he tried to retain control even though he couldn't, and he wanted to be compensated for his trouble. Even before my big upset of Wilander, he had started making some huge demands, astronomical demands. Fisher wanted something like 25% of my Grand Slam earnings, 50% of something else. He basically wanted a cut of everything. One night, Fisher showed up at our home in California and wrote down his demands on a paper plate. If I achieved a Grand Slam, winning all 4 majors or Grand Slams in the same calendar year, he wanted a bundle of rewards, including a Ferrari Testarossa. That was written on the plate. In fact, I remember that in one story Pete did with Tennis Magazine, there was a picture of him sitting in an umpire's chair wearing a hat with the logo of a Ferrari. The night Pete waved the plate around was surreal. I remember it in detail to this day. He and my dad had a huge fight. I got very uncomfortable because Fisher was like family and nobody was trying to screw him out of anything. We knew what he'd done for us. We were grateful, but the long distance coaching arrangement he proposed was untenable, and his demands seemed outrageous. As he was losing it emotionally, he seemed bent on blowing up the whole relationship. On another level, it was just funny. I remember thinking, I'm just a 17-year-old kid. I can barely keep two balls in the court, and Pete's talking about me winning a Grand Slam, something only two men in the entire history of the game have accomplished, and getting a Ferrari Testarossa out of the deal. The craziest thing is that it wasn't like Fisher needed the money. He was a wealthy doctor with a great practice, and he lived on a 5 acre estate. Our relationship effectively ended the night of the paper plate. My dad quietly decided to cut him off, and he had an even more powerful reason for that than the demands Fisher was making. Dad was worried that I relied on him too much, and that my development was being arrested. I needed to go out in the world and learn to deal with it firsthand. So it's a shame, really. Seems like once Pete started to get fame and the success that they always envisioned for him, he just lost his mind. He wanted a cut of the action, which of course putting all that work in from a young age, from Pete being what 8 9 years old to 17 18, so it's pretty much 10 years of development, and not just a coach where he's teaching an hour a week. The whole management of Pete's career, bringing in other coaches, talking with the family. Of course, you want a slice of the pie, but I think the way he's gone about it, he just is completely wrong. Um, and also, he still wouldn't leave his practice, which is very odd. If you really wanted to be involved, you would do. You'd go on tour with Pete. It seems like he completely lost his mind and emotionally broke down, which is a shame, really. So now Pete's getting a lot of attention from his peers. My results opened doors for me. Ivan Lendl called late in 1989. So Ivan Lendl is down as one of the top players to have ever played the game. At some point, I do want to do a story about him. He was number one in the world at the time, Grand Slam champion, but also had quite a hard exterior, and also known as quite a tough guy from Czech Republic. So Ivan Lendl called late in 1989 and invited me to stay with him and his family at his home in Greenwich, Connecticut. He was the top player in the world at the time, and he lived in this huge mansion. And I stored my stuff in a guest room, and he introduced me to his wife, Samantha, showed me his dogs, Ivan Lendl bred German Shepherds, and gave me a tour of his grounds and facilities. When I next spoke with my dad, I eagerly told him all I had seen, and he just said that if I worked as hard as Lendl had, I could create that kind of life for myself too. Ivan had that Iron Man reputation and image, and he definitely could be intimidating with that clipped Czech accent and hard-ass attitude. But he welcomed me into his home and made me feel comfortable. He was courteous and curious about me. One thing that struck me right away was that he had our entire week planned out in advance, in terms of when we got up, when we practiced, when we trained, ate and slept. He was up at 6 every morning himself. He was very regimented and focused. You could call it robotic, I guess, many people did, but he had it pulled together. He knew exactly what he wanted and how he was going to pursue it. It's interesting, really. I mean, we know now Ivan Lendl went into coaching. He coached Andy Murray for a while. So maybe towards the end of Ivan's career, which it was at the time, he was thinking about getting into coaching, or just wanted to get to know Pete. But either way, to open up his home and get to know Pete, and then they could train together, is amazing, really. And again, it's another person that's helping Pete out along his journey. Obviously proves to be a common thread and really important for Pete. So now we're going into 1990, the year in which he wins the US Open. So a few months later, at the start of 1990, I made the fourth round of the Australian Open. And just weeks after that, I played Ivan in the semi-finals of the big indoor event in Milan. I won the first set pretty easily, but then Ivan simply overpowered me. This is not the same Lendl with whom I had trained. In competition, he was a different animal. One thing he did after I got off to a fast start was slow down the pace. It was partly a way to get me into my head, because young, impatient players would rather hit and play than think and manoeuvre. So he's starting to make inroads. He's starting to go deep into tournaments. He's starting to pass rounds in tournaments. Fourth round in Australian Open. Semi-finals he's playing Ivan. He loses, which is expected, but he's getting better and better, and he's starting to make a dent in these big tournaments. Although the loss with Lendl did leave a bit of a mark on him, the encounter left me shell-shocked. This was one of the big cats of the game, and as kind as he had been to me earlier, he just mauled me. But again, it's all a learning curve. He's got to play Lendl, so he now understands the level at the top. In the months that followed, in many tournaments, he did well. He did have a bit of a rocky clay season. Worth a mention here, I moved on to the summer grass court circuit and, despite having very mixed feelings about grass courts, won a small event in Manchester. That's us. So that'll be at the Northern Tennis Club. I do remember that. So I used to play at the Northern Tennis Club as a junior. I was there not too long ago, actually. And I didn't see it last time I was there, but I remember as a junior seeing pictures of Pete Sampras there. I did actually play that tournament, that pro tournament myself, but lost in the qualies first round and got destroyed. But still, pretty cool that Pete Sampras has played in Manchester. He did play at Wimbledon, but then he lost in the first round. So he's doing well in a lot of tournaments, but still not completely found his game. He struggled a little bit on clay, lost first round at Wimbledon, but at times doing well in tournaments and picking up some titles as he goes along. So now we're not too far off the US Open. He's now at Toronto, which is just before the US Open. And this is where he played John McEnroe. John McEnroe was towards the end of his years, but he actually beat him 6-3 in the third, which did, of course, wonders for his confidence. He did actually lose eventually in the semi-finals to Michael Chang, but still, what a great accomplishment to beat John McEnroe and get to another semi-final. So now we're at the US Open. He describes himself as playing the best tennis he's ever played. I got hot and stayed hot, playing almost the entire event in the proverbial zone, the tranquil state of mind and body in which nothing can go wrong. You seem to have all the time in the world, the ball looks as big as a grapefruit, and nothing can disturb or stop you. So he's in the zone. His game has come together. He's playing amazingly well. He describes his serve as being able to hit aces at will. And he's storming through this tournament as a 19-year-old. He talks about staying calm at the big moments. I can't stress how important it is to train yourself to seek clarity at moments of doubt. You have to stay calm and have complete faith in your abilities. It takes a strong mind. This is something that's just come natural to Pete. And if it doesn't come natural to you, it's something that you need to develop, because it just gets you through those big moments, that state of calm, that clarity, being able to think and just look at the task in hand. It's an amazing quality, and the fact that it's come natural to him is obviously why he's Pete Sampras. But if it's something that we can all adopt in sport or in any aspects of life at important and nerve-wracking moments, then that can be a great quality. It was a godsend that at some level I really didn't know what I was doing. I was simply focused on the job at hand and unaware of the ramifications my success might have. I didn't have any desperate hunger to be a celebrity or the toast of the town. I liked playing tennis. I felt comfortable playing tennis. I saw no reason why you shouldn't or couldn't play the same way on one court as you did another. I just thought, well, here I am, doing what I've always wanted to do. I'm just going to throw the ball up, serve as hard as I can, and hope I hit the line. Sports psychologists make a living trying to teach athletes to adopt that attitude, but to me it came naturally. I doubt whether it can be taught or learned. Interesting. Amazing philosophy. I'd hope you can learn it. I hope some of us can learn, or at least learn part of it. And Pete Sampras doesn't think you can learn it, but hopefully we can. Or at least, not to his level, but at least adopt some of it. So he's powering through the US Open. He beats Lendl. So he manages to get his revenge against Lendl. He plays him in the quarterfinals and ends up beating him. So he's learned from his loss against him. And of course, he's improved since then. He's now a little bit older. His game's come together and he's playing even better. So he manages to beat Lendl. Then in the next round, he beats McEnroe again. So now we get to the final where he's playing Agassi. I'm in the final of the US Open September 1990 against Andre Agassi, a kid just like me, and he was easy to find over the net in his wild fluorescent lime green outfit and big hair. I couldn't know it at the time, but Andre and I would have a historic rivalry and both wind up in the International Tennis Hall of Fame. So in this final, all credit to Pete, he plays amazingly. I don't think Andre plays his best game, but Sampras certainly does and beats Andre. Andre bounced the ball one last time and went into that quick service motion of his. I was ready. Some 6,000 miles away, at a mall near my family's home in Palos Verdes, a slight man of Greek descent was walking around in a shopping mall with his wife. That was my mum and dad. They were too nervous to watch the match, so they decided to go shopping instead. Andre hit a good serve and I returned with the backhand. It was a defensive fend-off return that fell kind of short. He moved in to take a relatively easy forehand and he flubbed it, driving the ball into the net. I put my arms in the air and I looked over at the player guest box. It was full of cheering people, but the only guy I knew in there was Joe Brandy. Across the continent in the mall, my dad and mum were still wandering around, not knowing what had happened. It was some time before they strolled by an electronics store and saw that the televisions were all tuned to the US Open trophy presentation ceremony. The kid on camera accepting the US Open men's singles trophy was me. And that's where I finished for today at Racket Fanatic Podcast, Tales of a Tennis Legend. I'll see you next week.